Well, the world is still reeling from the global financial scandal known as the Panama Papers. International Relations Professor Robert Patman of the University of Otago has been reading into the mass data leak and its ramifications, and he joins us now to talk about it. Good evening.
Good evening, Rebecca.
What are the Panama Papers?
Well, the Panama Papers are a reference to a massive leak of financial documents from a law firm based in Panama called Mossack Fonseca. And what the leaks showed is how the rich and the powerful avoid tax. That is where they place their surplus assets. And it's been quite a revealing picture that's emerged. Politicians from around the world, movie stars, etc., etc. We've learnt quite a lot about where their assets are placed. And New Zealand has been quite prominent in these revelations.
Are these revelations illegal?
No, the Tax Justice Network have made it quite clear there's nothing illegal investing money in offshore foreign trusts. But what is a concern is the nature of some of the money that's being invested, whether it's been ill-gotten, for example, whether it's drug money or it's criminal, has criminal connotations. And it has raised a lot of eyebrows.
So tell us a wee bit more about how New Zealand is implicated.
Well, New Zealand is implicated in as much that it's listed as one of 21 countries which are seen as potential targets for people who've got, if you like, a lot of money and they want to deploy it in a way which will not incur much tax. Mossack Fonseca singled out New Zealand and recommended it to clients of its on its books as being a place where there was a tax-free foreign trust regime, where its legal system was excellent, and where the confidentiality was guaranteed. Now, Mr. Key, the Prime Minister, has moved quickly to say that doesn't mean we're a tax haven, and I think technically he's correct, but what these revelations seem to do is point to vulnerabilities in our trust laws which may need revision. In other words, we may have a regime which has been inadvertently abused to some extent by people moving the money around the world in this fashion.
What then is the definition of a tax haven?
Oh, well, basically where you can totally avoid tax.
Oh, nice. Any further consequences for the government on this one, do you think?
Possibly. The government's come under a bit of flack. Mr. Key, it led to Mr. Key being ejected from Parliament after examination by one of the Green co-leaders. But I think putting aside those relatively minor episodes, I think what the government will do under pressure, and possibly it may even take the opportunity to do with enthusiasm, is tighten up our trust laws. Because with money so mobile now and instant communications, the situation has changed, and you've seen this in the number of what they call offshore shelf companies, which when funds go into, they've expanded in the last decade from about 2,000 to 10,000. So potentially a problem there.
And have we seen any of John Key's money showing up in any tax-free zones around the world?
Not to my knowledge, but we do know that his legal advisor, Mr. Ken Whitney, has had connections with Mossack Fonseca. Now, one thing we should be clear here, Rebecca, is that this company where these revelations occurred is just the tip of the iceberg. It's probably only about 5% of the industry for tax avoidance. So we shouldn't, and as I say, it's not illegal. So we shouldn't. We're sure to put this is a huge problem.
Do we know how these papers made their way out to the light of day?
It was done over a year by someone who was negotiating with a German newspaper, and Süddeutsche Zeitung, and the Guardian newspaper was also involved. And they've been, there could be more revelations. So it's interesting. It has big international implications as well.
And Russia's president is thought to be heavily involved.
Well, he's not personally named, but some very close associates of him. For example, his best friend and the musician, the cellist, Sergei Rodolgin, apparently has $2 billion in assets, and he hasn't earned that through his performances, however brilliant, and apparently they are brilliant. And he got his press spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, is also identified. Then there's prominent members of the Russian parliament close to Mr. Putin. Now, what does this all suggest? It basically seems to support or corroborate a whole series of revelations recently that the Putin regime has accumulated secretly huge wealth. And the American government claimed in January of this year that Mr. Putin, they'd known this since 2007, that he was personally corrupt and he had accumulated huge wealth, which was largely secret and in overseas accounts. So in that sense, it could raise questions domestically for Mr. Putin, and it may also have something to do with Mr. Putin's very tough approach to the Ukraine, because conventionally, the Russian involvement in Ukraine, in the conflict there since 2014, has been interpreted in terms of great power rivalry. That is, American influence in the Ukraine and the Russians responding to it. But these revelations tend to support the view that the regime, the Putin regime, and some of its associates have been involved in the energy sector in Ukraine and were motivated to get involved because they feared the extension of the rule of law in the Ukraine. So this sort of revelation it can be embarrassing in itself, but it could also shed a new light onto some aspects of international relations that keep hitting the headlines.
Just the tip of the iceberg, as you say. Professor of International Relations Robert Patman from the University of Otago, thank you for coming.
Thank you.